Let me start with a big thank you. I know many of you advocated for Shakeout exercises, for Shakeout itself in your own communities, and I think it was extremely successful. We'll walk you through some of these stories as we go through, and I hope, as Dan pointed out, afterwards, I'll try and be short here and be brief, but I hope afterwards you share a little bit your experience and what you've encountered during the exercise. And why? Because it is about science, service, and community. The impetus of this was to provide data to the USGS on a practical basis, but we are actually doing more than that. We're actually providing a service to the USGS, but also to our communities. We're their spokespeople when communications have been compromised, when the cell phones stop working, when the internet might get cut off. We have that responsibility. And I would say it's almost a duty to speak up for our communities when they need help. And I know most of you here are doing this on a regular basis. That's why you practice. That's why you're taking responsibilities as officers in your club, as members of ARES groups, of MCOM groups. Some of you do OPSCOM. We want to serve, and this was a great opportunity to actually serve our communities. And lastly, it is all about community. The ham radio community is a tight-knit family. I'm happy to say that it's kind of fun that you get to talk with Finn in Norway, who stayed up, I should say early at this point, not late, right? Early. But all around the world, throughout the US, Canada, and, so we work as a community. What works for one group may not necessarily work the same for another group, but you can learn from each other and say, listen, we can try and solve problems together. And I think that's really valuable. And again, it doesn't end there. A lot of our families aren't amateur radio operators. A lot of our friends may not be our neighborhoods. We may be the only amateur radio operators or volunteer radio operators. And so we do have that ability to connect them to the outside world, especially when they're needed. And Shakeout was a great example of this. So what happened? On October 20th at 10:20, drop cover and hold on. We announced it in Southern California. I know that people all over the nation announced that. And this is one of my favorite pictures that came out of that. We actually took photos of ourselves here in the LA area, but this was actually ARES LAX High Desert. And you can see they have my sense of humor. I absolutely love this picture, right? In the middle of the desert under there. But they, that there is a point to this and why you take a picture like that. You want to show people this isn't just, this can be funny, but we're actually doing this. And it's really important. We also have, as leaders in our community, people look upon us to see what we're doing. I'm not too proud to get under that table and make sure that everybody around me sees that we're doing this, because it will protect people from falling objects during an earthquake. So that was part of how we initiated this. And generally speaking, I'm not a fan of groups that at 10:20 get on their horn, because realistically, after a major earthquake, you're not going to be on the radio in the first 10 minutes after the earthquake. Dennis right now is laughing and saying, most definitely not. Maybe within the first hour after you've checked on everybody in your neighborhood, made sure everybody was okay, right? And then this happened, because this was a staggered exercise and was 10:20 local time. I want to point this out. So Pacific time on the East Coast, these were, I've only mapped the people that CC'd the WinLink tactical address Shakeout, because that was the data I had. And by the way, this was mapped within WinLink. You could see the East Coast just lighting up. There are friends up there in Canada, but at 10:30 their time, at 8:30 Pacific time, they started rolling in. We started taking stock of what's happening. Then at 9:30 Pacific time, you can see some stations in the Midwest coming to that. Apparently a couple of eager beavers here in the San Diego area who wanted to be part of it. But I think what happened there is that they probably got overly excited. And then at noon, I took another snapshot, and look at that. You got the West Coast all over the place. And at that point, there literally were hundreds of messages. Understand that while this was happening, I was checking WinLink messages on one hand. On the other hand, I was also I was also in contact with USGS, and we'll talk a little bit about that, why that was, and kind of going back and forth trying to optimize the system. But this was extremely successful, and I really liked that "did you feel it" wave coming across. And it didn't stop here. It went to Hawaii. You know, we had the Philippines the day earlier. We had stations from Europe coming in. So it was an extremely well-received, widely activated exercise. And I think everybody was, by the way, USGS was thrilled about the international stations as well as the wide participation within the US and Canada. But they were thrilled about that because they didn't expect the international participation. So that's something for future shakeouts and exercises we can definitely build on. But it's really cool to see kind of how this wave came across. And by the way, on the East Coast here, the majority of those stations were actually associated with a Kentucky WinLink net, and here's a shout out to them. If you've never done that, a really open, great group of people having fantastic exercises. They pivoted their exercise in less than 24 hours. They had one exercise plan was kind of peer-to-peer, and I suggested, how about doing this and going through a gateway? And they pivoted everybody in 24 hours, and you can only really do that with really well-trained operators. So my takeaway from that is training works. And that is part of the community part. Everybody got into this kind of ham radio community. We're going to do this. By the way, you see the instruction set, try to make it larger than a 6.0. We highlighted here, everybody was larger than a 6.0. So a lot of people did really, really well on that. At the same time, the USGS on a short-term basis decided to do a live scenario page with only 24 hours warning of their own. So what they did, they took in all the "did you feel it" reports that they could map. They applied certain filters to it. So it was geofencing. There was some timestamp filtering in there as well. But what you see here on the right is a USGS community internet intensity map. And that is available on the USGS site. And I strongly encourage you to go to this website. And when you get the slides, you can certainly click on this. You can see in the bottom left here, that actually leads to the USGS website. And you can click on that and share that with your clubs. Now, every dot here is at least one "did you feel it" report that was received during the shakeout via amateur radio, either via Telnet or via RF. But you can see that's pretty densely populated area. They usually USGS likes using Southern California because traditionally we have the highest participation, but they are mapped groups throughout, they mapped stations throughout. Not everybody, they mapped out of the 771 they received, they mapped 323 in this. And so they plotted those in 173 blocks. And so that's what you see in this map. Again, that has to do with the fact that we have some really active, well-trained groups in Southern California. San Diego Aries, for example, trains on a regular basis. They're fantastic in standing up nets. The same for Ventura County and Aries LAX. Our friends up here in the Bay Area did really well. Of course, our friends in the Ridgecrest area, San Joaquin Valley, they practiced a lot. We have a lot of people from Las Vegas. So it was really a widely well-received exercise. And by the way, when you go to this website, you can click on this map and it actually opens up the map wider. Again, they applied certain filters, so not everything got mapped there, but I'll show you what it looks like in a moment. But this is when you click on this map, this is what you get. You can kind of see there is a cluster up here in Seattle, the greater Washington area. There always is a lot of participation here from the Oregon area. California, again, very strong showing here. And that, a couple of points you can click throughout, and you can actually click on them and figure out what their zip code is. But it's kind of fun. You see Kansas City, there are a couple of stations. So they were from all over the place. And I think that made everybody very happy to kind of have this wide participation throughout the country. In terms of a couple of numbers, I'm not going to kill you with numbers. The USGS mapped 772 WinLink "did you feel it" reports. And that was about where we were last year. It'd be kind of cool next year if we could double that. If you think about it, WinLink has grown from last year, we had 10,000, roughly 10,000 unique users every month. Now we're kind of at 15,000. So this represents about 5%. Would be nice if we could get 10 to 15% of WinLink users participating in this in Shakeout, but that's a future goal. Interestingly enough, about 2/3, 65% were sent via RF. And USGS was extremely pleased about that, because their whole point about this is amateur radio operators can send this when commercial options are not available. So seeing 2 out of 3 coming out of the area on RF, that's a really good message for everybody to take. 34, let's say roughly 35% came via Telnet. And that's a great thing too, because a lot of people sending it via Telnet, this was their first engagement with WinLink. In some cases, their first engagement with Did You Feel It? And I think it worked out extremely well, especially for people who don't live in earthquake country. Those of us living in earthquake country, we see the necessity of this. And every time we have an earthquake, mid-sized earthquake, we get 40 to 60 of these reports because people practice this. They see the value of this. But I think for a lot of groups where this isn't the case, kudos to you for making it meaningful in your context. An earthquake is a great example of a disaster, but it doesn't have to be. It could be a tornado. The principle stays the same. And that's really what we practiced here, whether it's a tornado, a hurricane, a flood, snowstorm, in LA, rain. It really doesn't matter all that much. The principle's the same. Something happens and you need to let people know what's going on. In this case, we did it with Did You Feel It? Overall, volunteer radio groups participated in Shakeout and registered 2,992 people. And you can read those statistics on the shakeout.org website, which also means there are a lot of people who did their own exercises that weren't necessarily related to WinLink. So a lot of people had a lot of participation in localized exercises. CERT teams went out, reported back. People went to schools, shared their experiences there. I think that's a pretty good participation in this. These are the numbers for the US. And then, of course, total US Shakeout participation was 17.5 million people registered. So you may think 772 reports is a drop in the bucket, but it's the 772 people who will get out when nobody else will be sending these reports. So I think that was a really great takeaway for everybody involved. And again, USGS asked me to really extend their gratitude for this. It was extremely valuable to see. And here are all the 772 messages that USGS received mapped on a Google map. They actually provided me with the data, and I just popped it on the map here so everybody can see this. And we'll talk a little bit about that strong showing in East Asia here. Of course, US, very strong showing. The darker the color here, the higher the intensity reported. That's how I mapped it. Strong, as always, from Hawaii. We had a station in Panama that's participating regularly. We had a couple of great stations in Austria, Germany, the UK, Australia. I think there was a station in New Zealand that wasn't mapped because of a date cutoff. And of course, a strong showing from the Philippines. We'll talk more about that in a moment. But that was a really satisfying result for everybody involved. So I think all of you can be proud of what you've achieved there. Some people did you feel it? Some people did entire did tabletop exercises. Others did entire deployment exercises. I know in LAX Northeast, we actually got on our regular repeater, which we couldn't stay on because we were actually interfered with. So we went on simplex and we got everybody from the repeater to simplex. Pretty real scenario. And then we did for half an hour, because it was a work day, we did a couple of exercises the way we usually would do this. We took polls from people. We asked about their situation. We asked when they would be able to deploy. So this was a really realistic experience for us. And we followed that up with the CS 2022 exercise, and more on that later. Couple of things that we can improve on going forward. I think one thing, and this is, by the way, what you're seeing in the middle here, the exercise ID variations. That's what I got from USGS. as the exercise unfolded, because they expected everybody to use Shakeout 2022, and that's what their filters were set at. But what people said were, everything from ETO, WinLink Thursday Shakeout, to Shakeout 2022, to, really doing their own thing here. There were different punctuation and whatnot. So they relaxed the filters a little bit to make sure that everybody gets mapped. But I think going forward, one thing we can do is, for Shakeout at least, agree on one exercise idea for everybody, so to make life easier for USGS. When you're doing exercises throughout the year, and you can do your own exercise with Did You Feel It however you want to, by all means, have your own exercise ID, be creative, make sure everybody spells it the same way, because that tells USGS that this is an organized exercise coming from one group and makes it easier for them to allocate where you're going. Longitude is still an issue. There were about 53, 54 stations that located themselves here in China all the way to Kazakhstan, and they're exclusively North American stations. So it's kind of funny, because if you turn the US around, kind of flip it on its side, these are the California stations. Up here, you've got the Washington and Oregon stations. Then here, a couple of Midwestern stations, and here's all the East Coast, right? So understand longitude in North America is a negative number. So it should be minus, in our case, minus 118. And that's something, is a training challenge that we want to address. We want you to address with your groups going forward, because this stuff will crop up again, not just with Did You Feel It? This is an issue that you definitely want to make sure your operators are mindful of, because here's the thing, they might ask for resources to be delivered at a certain site. And if the logistics group gets placed somewhere in China, they're unlikely to actually deliver the goods to where you need them. And that is something that's a practical consideration. And that's, in my mind, a pure training issue. We are looking for ways to kind of do a check, and we're working on that. But please address it with your group to make it a learning experience for everybody. Everybody messes up. I've messed up. This is just normal. And it's important to really tell people, listen, check your data before you hit that session button and start, and then click start. You want to make sure your data is correct. I have seen this. This doesn't just happen to volunteer radio operators. I've seen it happen to professionals under stress. These things do happen. It's not the end of the world. You need to catch it and then maybe send an updated report. But this is kind of important to really relate. In this case, USGS only used latitude, longitude to map because they wanted to test this. So in an actual report, they would have double-checked that against the address that was provided. But in this case, they gave us information based on latitude, longitude, to really make sure everybody is aware of that challenge. Also, more local exercises. I think it was a weekday, I understand that, but please feel free to have local exercises built around Shakeout. I think they're extremely satisfying. We'll talk about what we did here in Southern California, which was very exciting. But we do want to encourage you to not just do Did You Feel It? That's what kicks it off. That's what gets it started. But then think about, well, what are the consequences of this if water, power lines are broken? If you have damage to report, who are you going to send this? What kind of information are you going to send? These are things you want to think of now under blue skies, as it's called here in California. Because when you have those bad days, that's not the time to start scrambling and figuring out how things work. You want to go into it with a game plan. The plan will change, but at least go in with a game plan. A couple of things that went really well. Participation. I already mentioned that. We had great participation nationally, internationally, and kudos to the Philippines. The Philippines have been working, Philippine operators have been working really hard bringing WinLink gateways online. And this was their kind of capstone, testing it. And it worked out extremely well. They did a phenomenal job sending Did You Feel It reports and additional check-ins. They CC'd Shakeout on this. And so it was really a fantastic experience. I think it was very rewarding for them, but it's also great for us to see how well prepared they are. And for those of you who are familiar with the Philippines a little bit, they have a whole gamut of natural threats including typhoons, including earthquakes, including volcanoes, so mudslides. So it's just, there are a lot of things that can be very challenging very quickly. So having a robust communications infrastructure really helps. And they've done a phenomenal job putting this together and practicing it. Data, I think the data overall, from what I've heard from USGS, was extremely satisfying. People put a lot of information, additional information in the comments, which is always appreciated. They filled out the forms really well, except for the longitude in some cases. But other than that, the data was really, really valuable and well received. And of course, RF usage, 2/3 of participants sending it over the air. That really, really drove down the point that, you know, we can do this. But wait, there's more. For those of you who may not be familiar with it, we very often in Southern California do an exercise following the actual shakeout. So it doesn't have to be necessarily on the same day. It makes it easier for a lot of people if it's on a Saturday or a Sunday because they're off from work, including myself. So what we did the California Shakeout exercise, and that was a regional collaboration. That was the first regional collaboration exercise we did on that scale. And it was extremely satisfying. We took the Thursday Shakeout as the initial earthquake, and then we told everybody, well, you've been deployed already for 12-hour shifts. And on Saturday morning, you start your shift at 8 a.m. and something else might happen. And that's exactly what we did. So we had this SoCal regional collaboration exercise. We developed a common IAP in the planning of this, an incident action plan, which was an experience in and of itself. Not all the groups were familiar with the action planning cycle, but we got it together. People were extremely collaborative, worked together. We had a fantastic participation from our friends in San Diego areas participated. High Desert, one of the local districts here in Aries LAX participated. San Joaquin Valley, Dan, the entire section essentially participated. We had LA County DCS, which is the embedded radio group there, participate. We had our friends in East Kern County participate, and Dennis hopefully will talk a little bit more. For those of you who probably recognize him right there. So we had a shared incident action plan for this to kind of get us used to the fact to work together. The goal of the exercise, the objective of the exercise, was to have local exercises like we normally would. And then take that information we're gathering from our local exercises, aggregate it using WinLink, and sent that data to the regional coordinator. In a way, we were following what in California is referred to as the standardized emergency management system, which goes from a single unit to the city, to the county, to the region, all the way up to the state. But we were imitating this. All the groups involved there were kind of county level groups. So we really focused on getting that information together on a county level and then aggregating it and sending it to Dennis, W6DQ. And I have to say, we couldn't have asked for a better net control for the HF side of this. There are a couple of challenges we faced that particular day, and hopefully in the afterwards, Dennis can talk a little bit more about the details of this. One was, why did we aggregate? Well, aggregation has a big advantage. We talked about this before the meeting started a little bit. If you send a lot of messages, even small messages of like 1 kilobyte size, and you're getting 20 messages, that's 20 kilobytes you need to feed through HF, right? And especially if people take their own HF connections, that eats up a lot of circuit capacity. But if we aggregate those in CSV files, and WinLink makes this very easy within the mapping application, we can cut this down. 20 messages are 0.7, 0.8 kilobytes, and you have the same data in one file that's smaller than the 20 files you took in on a VHF or even mesh level. Does that make sense? So essentially, we just took WinLink, or whatever is already built into WinLink, we compressed it down, and then we sent it to the regional coordinator. And what happens there is We generated situational awareness. So San Diego Aries generated situational awareness. Aries LAX generated situational awareness. Kern County generated situational awareness. San Joaquin Valley section generated situational awareness. We send it all to the regional coordinator, and he aggregates this information. And what happens then? Anybody? As he aggregates that, what does he do? He creates a common operating picture. Exactly. So now we have this overview that one station or one area, just like an EOC, would have an overall picture of what's going on the ground, all the way from the Mexican border to deep into the Central Valley to all the way over to San Francisco. And I think that was extremely powerful. And it all started with operators. Here's David, KK60A, and our friends up here in High Desert, really deploying, in our case, to hospitals. They did a whole antenna farm up there, and they sent the information to Dennis up in Ridgecrest. And again, Dennis did a phenomenal job because for whatever reason, HF conditions just dove. They disappeared during that day. We had a tough time making this. And for those of us in the field, that was extremely challenging. But because Dennis, one, has a fantastic antenna farm, and I got pictures. But Dennis has a fantastic setup, and he is extremely experienced and had a very steady hand. He knew exactly what he was doing, what he was going to do. He kept everybody together, and I think that was extremely valuable and powerful. And we had an IAP, we had a common plan. So we knew if not on this frequency, he had to be on another frequency. And just to give you an example of what that looked like in real life, you saw David at the hospital. This was actually our station at the LA County EMS agency. And yes, that's what it looks like. And you can see very bare bones. This is a simple Chameleon MCOM2 antenna with a little bit of a counterpoise thrown out here. And that's how we operated. We had to crank up to 80 watts for voice. On WinLink, it was easier. We could do it on 20 watts. But for voice, it was 80 watts just to get over the hill to Dennis. And for those of you paying close attention, you guys see where the antennas are for the EMS agency? Not up here where you expect them. They're down here on the first floor roof. Just FYI, right? But so you can see Tron's VHF and Mike here, his VHF stuff is actually higher than the antennas on the building here. But this is what we were dealing with on the ground, and I think it worked extremely well. I'm under no illusion about my or our setup here as, you know, our type 1 communications team, because this is what we were transmitting into. So Dennis obviously has a fantastic setup. So that's really where all the heavy lifting happened with his antennas and his radio. So he was able to pick us out, even though we were dealing with very challenging conditions. But I have to say one thing, it worked. And that's at the end of the day, what matters. In terms of traffic, and I want to show you this a little bit, different groups send whatever they would send on a regular basis. So San Diego sent updated Did You Feel It reports, right? So as they're getting these Did You Feel It reports, we called for another earthquake at 0900. They sent updates to those Did You Feel It reports pretty much on the hour, very reliably. So you always knew what was going on in San Diego Aries. We decided to do aggregated Did You Feel It reports, and you can see the little squiggly lines here. But we also did bed availability reports, which you can see here. The yellow actually means the hospital service level in this exercise for this facility was yellow, which is a code that LA County uses. Again, this was an exercise. And then we also did, and you can see that up here, we also did Hicks 254 facility status. I think it should be 251 facility status, which tells you is the power on, is water running, is the sewage system working? That's really valuable information. And you can see different groups chose to send different kind of data, and you can kind of see almost immediately what the issues are, where the issues are, right? And here you can see is Dennis's station. This is where it all was collected. And I have to say, good deal by everybody. Everybody worked really, really closely together. By combining the information into CSVs, we were able to compress the information and send it forward, giving Dennis a fantastic overview of what was going on. And we encourage everybody to start practicing it this way. Do we have a question? No? All right. So, oops, before we go on to this, the point there was, it was a regional exercise, and we really encourage everybody. Here's the thing. Any disaster is going to be local, but having friends especially experienced friends in places that you can reach is going to help you down the road. We want to be resources for our friends in the Ridgecrest area, in Central Valley, in San Diego, and they want to do the same thing for us. Working together as teams, I think, is one of the big outcomes of Shakeout. And we do encourage all of you to start thinking about it this way. I would love to expand this and have more groups participate going down in the future, simply because this is the reality of it. We will have to work together. This is not contesting where everybody is looking to get the most points. This is how do we help the most people, and we do that by collaboration, by working together, by helping each other. And again, we were really lucky to have Dennis as regional coordinator, because he kept everybody together, and he really did a great job walking us through, being patient with us, but also moving on when, people were still working on this. So it was great pacing all around. With that, let's move on to real world. Did you feel it? So we did this exercise on a national level. I showed you a little bit what a local exercise looked like. But what happened after that is this. In the Philippines, 5 days after Shakeout, there was a 6.4 earthquake in Luzon, in the northern part of the Philippines, right? And believe it or not, people did send Did You Feel It reports. Why? Because they had just practiced this. So some of these dots here are actually transmitted via amateur radio. And yes, people died in this earthquake. So keep that in mind. This is a community that's used to earthquakes. They're built for earthquakes. They experience it all the time, but they're also seeing the value of this. More interestingly, on November 16th, there was an earthquake in Texas. And Texas is not particularly prone to earthquakes, right? But guess what? People sent Did You Feel It reports, and 2 of those were actually by amateur radio operators, and both of them have participated in Shakeout. I actually looked that up, right? And you say, well, 2 is not a huge number, is it? But here's the thing. It's not just the 2 of them that are doing this. They are the spokespeople for their communities, right? So Texas didn't lose any power. They didn't lose any water in this. But here's the thing. The 2 of them had practiced this barely 3 weeks before. And they went into what they practiced, and they actually sent this information to the USGS, and it was received there. And let me tell you, every time amateur radio reports come in, USGS looks at those very closely, because you put your call sign to this, you put your good name to this. So one of the big takeaways, and something I think everybody needs to remember, is for some, it may have been a short exercise. Did you feel it? For others, it may have been more involved. But at the end of the day, the biggest outcome of this is that people actually use it when they need to. And that means we've achieved our objective. It is in everybody's mind. And instead of freezing and thinking, I don't know what to do, people say, listen, I know exactly what to do. I can start it. Did you feel it? And once that is sent, I can actually start looking at, how do I stand up a net? Do we need to do damage assessments? What are our next steps? The biggest outcome out of Shakeout is this then. To empower all of you, all of us, to be the best community resource that we can be for our communities, for our neighborhoods, for our families, for our hospitals, for our agencies, whatever it is. Our power lies in building these networks, these ad hoc networks, whether you are a group in Kentucky that practices HF on a regular basis, whether you're San Diego areas, Ventura County, which does weekly exercises with Did You Feel It, whether you're Aries LAX, whether you're any group throughout the United States, throughout Canada, throughout Europe, Asia, Africa, New Zealand, Australia, wherever you are, make this a point, because here's the thing, I promise you this, if there's a day that is really, really bad, and you can say, listen, I know things are bad, I know your communications are down, but here's the thing, my friends and I, we can connect, we can create a network that will give you that situational awareness, that you as the agency, you as the person needing the information, can turn into common operating picture. That is extremely valuable. And with that, I want to say, like James Bond movies, Shakeout will return in 2023, and I hope you will be part of it. Thank you. All right, let's take some questions here. Let me stop the share. Dennis, did you want to comment real quick on the experience we had with HF on the 22nd, I think it was?
Yeah, it was the 22nd. Sure, I can make some comments about that. Yeah, it wasn't what we expected. You know, we'd had a week leading up to that where conditions had been very, very good. And then that day, just everything went to heck in a handbasket. The propagation really tanked, unfortunately. So I think we didn't get as many stations participating as what we had expected. But the ones that did participate were very good. I mean, we had good information, and everybody really performed well. You know, we had one thing that I learned, my one lesson learned is I need another operator to be there on the HF side. You know, if you notice in the picture, there were two of us there. Cap, WX1 WIZ was our local net control running. He was doing a local WinLink net as well as a local voice net on 2 meters. And it was, if that had been a real situation, it would have been a total overload for me. So I really need to have other people there. But, you know, I was running the voice net on 2 different bands, 40 and 80, well, 40 and 75, as well as WinLink, which was agile. I could run it pretty much anywhere I wanted to on any of the bands, HF bands. And that was really nice to be able to do that. Having the resources to be able to do that was really great. And it was quite an experience. And I really appreciate the fact that we got to participate with you in the regional exercise. It was quite an exercise and learned a lot, and look forward to next year, possibly doing the same thing again. It was, I was looking, I've got my notes here of all the participants on the nets, and we sure should have had a lot more, but we had San Diego Aries on the HF net. We had, of course, your Northeast District, LA, LA High Desert. We had San Joaquin Valley. There was also, he wasn't participating, but I had somebody check in from Orange County down there in Southern California. He wasn't actually participating, but I guess he heard our net and came by and said hello, which was kind of interesting. That was cool. Oh yeah, I actually had a check-in from the San Diego County Blood Bank there, from their Aries group. So he was one of the HF check-ins, and we had a check-in from Idaho. So yeah, it was an interesting morning, and I appreciate all the help that I had from other operators. That really helped a lot when we were trying to cover two bands at the same time because of conditions being what they were. So I was able to get some relays and have somebody be on one of the other bands to make announcements and things like that. So Oliver, it was great. Really enjoyed working with you on that, and really appreciate all the effort that everybody did. So look forward to next time.
Thank you, Dennis. And as Dan pointed out, we should probably do one of these every 6 months, and just get into that habit of doing this. Couple of things that were takeaways for me, and just from the CS 2022, kind of beyond Did You Feel It? I think a lot of radio groups aren't used to working with incident action plans. And what I would like to encourage everybody is to practice that. You don't have to fill out everything, but I think everybody should start thinking about, start with the 205. That's the natural one for all of us, the radio comms plan, and then do a 202 with your incident objectives and a 204. If you can do those three, the 204 essentially, the 202 tells you why it is you're doing what you're doing, and 204 tells you the what and the how, right? If you can get into kind of this mindset where you get everybody to look at their 204, kind of have an overview of what it is they need to do, and then look at the resources, you're way ahead of the game. And what we're finding is, as we're working with agencies, they like the fact that we can just plug in, that we understand how they're operating, that we're not so totally different that they need to explain everything to us. We recently had an exercise which was based in LA County, even was the first LA County hospital exercise we've had since COVID started, right? And we were really, really happy in our district that we worked so well hand in hand with what they needed, that our agency partners really appreciated the fact that we had listened to them and we built the capabilities that asked us for, including sending spreadsheets. It's a big deal for most agencies. If you can send spreadsheets, that means you can send data, you can send resource requests, you can provide this additional situational awareness that they can use to create a common operating picture. So please consider that as you go forward, and any type of exercise is valuable. And I highly recommend that. ETO did a fantastic job getting a lot of people on the air for this exercise, and they write really great. The MCOM training organization, I could put the link in, most of you should be familiar with that, but they write really nice exercise instructions. San Diego Munir is here. I saw you on the system here. Writes fantastic exercises, and they're open to pretty much everybody, right? Munir, just nod if you. Yeah, thank you. And so really fantastic exercises every Friday that you can participate in. And so the more you exercise, the less you will have that activation hump as you go forward. Dennis pointed that out with HF nets. The more you set that up, the better you'll get. Any questions?
Okay, before we, Barry, you want to bring us up to speed on what's in chat?
Sure. Well, there's two brand new Zoom users or new people to our net tonight. N3 XUS, Gene from Texas, and Scott Reed, KM6 RFB from Lincoln, California. So welcome those two guys. From Victor, Victor has a question about switching from exercise to real life emergencies, which I know you guys have had during a drill. Are operators cognizant that we won't be operating nets, or will we? I think we move away from Ops 3 and Ops 2 roll calls and into operational nets, and we'll be operating under tactical calls and official operations. What will that incident net be called? Is this transition discussed at any point, either planning or in debrief?
All right. Again, this is very different from group to group. I can only tell you what it is for LAX Northeast. In our operational practice, the way this works is you would send your did you feel it from home. We've actually done exercises where we ask people, send it, did you feel it in your winning check-in from home? And then tell us when you'll be ready to deploy. Because we send people to hospitals, and we want everybody to go through their list before they go to the hospital. So they bring their masks, they bring enough food, they bring enough water, they essentially can operate on their own for 72 hours, right? Once they're at the hospital, we actually integrate them into the nets. And then it's all agency-based traffic. The hospital tells us this is the bed availability as of the time, and then the operator sent that to the county agency. The hospital says we need these resources from the county, and our operator sent that to the county. In some cases, and that's what we practiced in the last exercise, the hospital may say, these are the resources we want from either the city we're located in or from our partners. And then it's a different type of resource request And we still send that because at that point, you may have to send it out of area to reach an internet, in one of our hospitals, their headquarters is in the Bay Area. And they wanted to test, can we actually send a WinLink message via RF out of the area to our logistics people in the Bay Area? And that worked extremely well. So that was very positive. And so in that case, we are doing what our memorandum of understanding, our MOU, says we're going to do. And the same thing for San Diego, right, Munir? You go into your standard operating procedure. This is what you signed up to do, and you're doing the job the best everybody can. So, and again, you've got groups like San Diego, Ventura County. I think I saw Rob here somewhere, is welcome to comment on this, who practice this very, very regularly. In some cases on a weekly, monthly basis, but at really high frequencies, because these skills go stale very quickly. If you don't do this for a couple of months, it's a very high hump to get over. Does that answer your question, Victor? I'll take that as a yes. Dan has his hand up. Dan, what did I miss?
Yeah, Mr. Dan, you want to take the floor?
Dan, did I put you to sleep? WL7CLO?
Probably. Well, there's another question in the chat we can do. Tom from Maryland wants to know, did you make any use of WinLink RMS relay station?
Did we make any use of WinLink RMS relay stations? What do you mean by that?
Tom, you want to unmute and ask?
Yeah, WinLink RMS relay stations are just one setup that they'll take the WinLink message via whatever means on VHF, UHF, whatever you set up, and they'll sit there in kind of a mailroom until that station can get them out on HF.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah. We refer to those as hybrid gateways. So sorry about that. I really, thanks for clarifying. Yes, in fact, whenever we do exercises, we usually disconnect both our RMS packet and our hybrid stations from the internet. And we also create local users, because there's no reason for local traffic to be sent out via HF. It just clogs up the frequency, right? I mean, if I'm at the MAC, LA County MAC, a hospital station, let's say Huntington Hospital or Kaiser, Los Angeles, that doesn't have to go out via HF somewhere. I can just pick that up locally. That makes a lot more sense than, using up. And I think Dennis noticed that when one group decided to send all their traffic, and CC, the regional coordinator, instead of having these nicely packaged messages, all of a sudden you're downloading 20, 30 messages that you're thinking, I don't really have to download these people. So so yes, we highly recommend that you practice that. Practice what you preach. If you're saying you can do this without internet, practice doing it without internet, because it's eye-opening. It was for us when we first did this, but we also have ways of connecting our gateways. We very often take a very positive approach to managing traffic, that we tell people you deposit hospital traffic on one gateway that may not have HF connected at all, and you deposit any out-of-area gateway, like did you feel it, and family notifications and so on, which we allow our operators to do during events. On a different gateway that has HF forwarding capability. We are very cognizant of circuit capacity management. And if you ever get a chance to read the first or second chapter of I think it's now the RRI manual or the NTS manual, not the radiogram part, but the circuit management part, it's actually highly intelligent writing. It's really well written. Highly recommend everybody read that, because it really gets you to pay attention to circuit capacity. And Scott, you had your hand up, right? So Tom, did that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Outstanding, thank you. Scott, you had your hand up. You still want to?
No, can you hear me okay?
Yes, you're fine.
Oh, just to give you guys a little bit of background. So I'm with the State of California Emergency Medical Services Authority. I work in disaster logistics. We're in the process of developing, updating all of our amateur radio equipment to encompass WinLink and ALE for a lot of this stuff. And we're going to be one of the agencies that you guys potentially would be playing with because we provide mobile field hospitals.
Okay.
And staffing and everything that goes inside of it. And we provide our own communications rig that will have HF and ALE capabilities and satellite service.
Excellent. And we're happy, you know, feel free to reach out. I think I got your information. You may have talked with John up in Walnut Creek, right?
I have talked with John. I've also talked with Scott Curie and David, who's on here. We were planning on coming down for the medical exercise this year, but things got busy and it didn't work out. We would like to participate maybe next year with you guys and to see how we as a state agency can interop with locals and how that interaction works. Because of what we do. I'm one of our communication specialists in my job function. So,
absolutely, we're happy to do that. Please reach out. We're happy to do a couple of lead up exercises, integrate you that way. It could be via WinLink Telnet, and you know, we are big on trying out these pathways, because if we know who to talk with and how to get a hold of them, I think, and that was part of what our regional exercise was about. We're already ahead of the game. We don't have to figure that out during. So Scott, I really appreciate you speaking up and making that connection here. And please feel free to reach out. I'll just pop my email again into the chat. That goes for everybody. If you have questions, please feel free
actually,
to reach
Oliver,
out.
I do have a question for you. I can reach out to you offline. I'm starting to work with RIM Max Track,
Okay.
board, and I got those and the DRA boards. And so trying to get things set up. We're trying to build a test platform to show our leadership how this works so they have more of a buy-in.
Oh, that's a great idea. We actually use both the RA boards and the RIM for our gateways. You know, for the field stations, we often use signalings because we still want to do fine tuning while we're in the field and do that relatively quickly. But most gateways here run on DRA boards or RIM boards.
Yeah, so that's kind of where we're at. And so I'm kind of the guy that's been given the task to look into this and how to make this fly.
Outstanding. Again, please feel free to reach out. Anything we can do to support and help, we're happy to do.
Thank you.
I see that Dan is back finally. Hi, Dan. You want to take it away?
Yeah, and I think nope, not yet. Okay, how about now?
How about now?
Better.
Cal, you
Can you
sound-
hear me? No?
Yeah, we can hear you without echo. Go ahead.
Much better.
You can, okay. Well, this is 1 is none, 2 is 1, and 3 is me. I'm going through an iPad up higher that's going out to an LTE-4 tower about 5 miles away. We got squalls moving through here. And while Starlink's normally wonderful, for about the last hour, it's decided to pack a 2 months worth of outages into 1 hour, and this is the hour. So I object to something you said, and I'm sure it was just an oversight. What I wanted to do was exercises like this every quarter, not every 6 months, because most of us, I think, don't have the opportunity to get practice in, quote, more real world situations like you guys are doing every weekend. So just remember that. And I know what you're going to say, so we can do it on our own, and we're going to get there eventually. But other than that, it was a spectacular experience. And for Scott, do you reach out? Do you reach out to all?
Uh-oh, I think we just lost the Starlink connection here.
Yeah, a little bit of fade out.
Remember that.
Hold to him later. I was gonna try to make some connections.
Nope, it's not happening there, Dan. You got a problem. We're going to move on and we'll come back to you, Dan. Jim, you want to take the floor?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, I'm Jim Price, KO6GM. I'm also a volunteer with the California OES. I'd just like to mention to everyone, I'm not sure how many of you know this, there was a state grant for $6 million for our counties and other some other cities and local agencies to purchase HF, ALE, and WinLink equipment. And 70 agencies have been approved. And as amateur radio operators, they're going to need our help because a lot of these agencies may or may not have experience with HF radio. So if you're associated with one of them, great. If not, you might want to contact them and see where they are in the process, because there's a lot of training and testing and training that will be involved. And I know our technical capability will be able to help them. Back to Nick.
Thank you so much, Jim. And I think that's a good point to underline here. What we as volunteer radio operators can bring is really expertise and kind of that bolstering the capabilities, especially in times of need when people, and I know that from our hospitals, a lot of, especially emergency room doctors and nurses, a lot of people in facilities have amateur radio licenses. But here's the thing, in an actual disaster, they have other priorities. And so we can step in for 12, 24, up to 72 hours and really, really make sure that they have the communications they need to keep the lights on and really take that worry and reduce that at least a little bit. And I think that's a great thing we can do. All right, Tom.
Wait a minute, before we go to Tom, let's pick Dan back up. He looks like he's got enough bandwidth to finish what he was saying.
Is my audio audible?
Sorta.
Okay, well, it's jury rigged right now. I just wanted to make sure Oliver knew that what I wanted to do was a large exercise like this every quarter instead of every 6 months. You got that. Okay. And then I was hoping to get in touch with Scott and see if we couldn't maybe do something if he wants to reach up this far to Mariposa County. And theoretically, we're now dealing with Calaveras County for our emergency medical services management. So, yeah, you mentioned it. I think it's who you're talking to. You got to know who to talk to, and they have to know who you are and how you can talk to them. So that's it. It was a great learning experience. And I go back and look at my notes and the messages that were passed periodically, and I'm smacking my head most of the time. So I can't wait for 2023. Like I said, what we need to do is practice for shaking up 23.
I'm with you, and I'm fine. You know, I'm a big fan, you know, of extending this. We could do a 5th Saturday exercise. I love having these 2-layer, 3-layer exercises where you have a local layer and a regional layer. And that gives everybody opportunity to practice both locally and, you know, just, and Tom will get to this, get to you in a second. In June, one of the things we practiced in LAX Northeast was what we call V2D, voice to digital. Because the question here is, what happens if you have somebody at a hospital who's never done this before? They have the guts to pick up that radio and call you. You need to be able to walk them through, this is how you fill out a resource request. And the nice thing about WinLink is it allows you to do that. You bring up the form on WinLink, you type it in on their behalf, and then you send it to wherever it needs to go. And that creates a traceable message. Well, guess what? On November 17th, we had an exercise, and there was a hospital who came online and had never done any of this before. We actually had to explain to the operator, and kudos to him for having the guts to come on, right? We had to explain to him, if you don't have an FCC license, you need to find somebody locally that has an FCC license, and they either stand next to you or they send the traffic. And he says, you know what, I'll be right back. And he came back with a licensed amateur radio operator, was one of their staff, who then sent all their traffic. And Lou, and I think Lou is already at our digital net, walked him through with the help of the forms that were available in WinLink, which are copies, identical copies of the official LA County forms, right? And it captured all that information and it created a traceable message. That was really cool. Anyways, but so I'm with you on more exercises. All right, let's do 2 more comments and then we'll wrap this up. Tom, go ahead, and then Dan, we'll give you the final word.
Okay, I just, for the sake of your knowing, the urban search and rescue teams call California, which they refer to as Region 5, which is what you guys are on the federal scheme of things. They said, oh, we're going to Region 5, shake and bake, because you get earthquakes and fires. So that's how they think of you. You're the shake and bake district. But one thing about hospitals and getting in on the process, if you can possibly get in early, the vendors they turn to for these installations often know less than we do about how to set it up in a hospital. And these are allegedly professional radio installers. And yet the installation you fall heir to when they're long gone and have collected their money can be a lot less than optimum. The thing you mentioned about hospitals, 2 of ours put theirs on the administration building roof with a care tower right behind it. 100 degrees of simplex horizon disappears in one swell swoop. So, you know, trying to talk them into letting us do remote control over their internal network is sort of like taking a pick to the Mount Everest. You know, you're slow going.
Tom,
I
I
think
hear
people are scared.
Tom, I hear you. That is something we deal with in LA all the time because hospitals change. They're living, breathing. They change buildings around. They built new buildings. One of our hospitals moved the EOC to a different building, and they put a physical therapy ward, or whatever you want to call that, physical therapy station in there. So every time we go there, I remember that the ham on station there walked me through. We actually had to take out bandages and, you know, physical therapy equipment before we could get to the cable, to the coax cable and the radio. That's the reality of it. And we usually tell people, you bring your own equipment, because it also doesn't help you if you show up at a hospital. And for me, I look at one of our hospitals has this wonderful Kenwood TS2000. It's a fantastic rig. I look at this, I'm like, okay, now what? I can set up my own IC7100 in under 10 minutes. And I feel very comfortable with that, but that's a radio I'm not comfortable with. So those are things, and then you don't know. We've experienced that at hospitals too, that somebody didn't know what that coax thing was installing Ethernet. Well, now they cut the coax. Next thing you know, you're transmitting into get empty. So those are things that, Tom, well taken points. These are things that it's always safer, I think, to bring your own station, things you're familiar with, and because it costs time finding that out the hard way. So we want to be up and running, and we tell our people on VHF, UHF, once they show you where to set up, you need to be up and running in under 15 minutes. That's challenging if you've tried that, you know. So, and if you want to do HF, we give you another 15. So, but yeah, that's just the way it is. We want to keep this challenging. All right, final comment from Dan, and then we'll wrap it up so everybody can do dinner. Oh, in Finn's case, breakfast.
Do this. I'll unmute now. I wanted to emphasize that one of the biggest learning events from this exercise was how much more efficient it is to consolidate reports as CSVs.
Mm-hmm.
It's a tiny fraction. I think typically, you recommended consolidating 5 at a time. I think you could go well beyond that and still have a smaller file to transmit than a single actual. Did you feel it? Well, did you feel it's slightly different? Field situation report. And anything that you can consolidate in one, how do I say it? WinLink is intimidating. It's so vast. It's so old. There's so many nooks and crannies. You never know where you should be working on next. but pay close attention to the recently improved GIS capabilities, mapping capabilities, and go look at the 11-minute Wave Talker presentation by Phil Sherrard about how to filter the incoming data so you can spit out an even more economical CSV that'll make it easier for the real GIS people to do what their emergency managers want. I mean, and a year ago, I'd have been scratching my head. But after going through the exercise and paying attention to the examples that Oliver shared, WinLink suddenly became much more meaningful. So
Thank you, Dan.
and
What
I
we
hope
did.
I hope somebody wasn't aware of that, because I'm looking around and I'm seeing a lot of people who probably know more about it than I do.
Well, that's a part of the sharing process, right? And I think for us locally, we got all our data in within the first half hour, then we combined it, and that was our goal. By at the bottom of the hour, sent the traffic to Dennis, and that worked extremely well. People keep commenting that our nets are very quiet, and I keep telling them that's because everybody's working. It's just that you don't have time to chat. You're doing stuff. So this is part of the fun of it. And with that, I do want to say a big thank you to Dan and the RATPAC for inviting us. And I'm happy to say that it is us. It's Dan, WL7COO, Dennis, W6DQ, all the fantastic people who participated. I saw a couple of people from High Desert, from San Diego. Many of you participated and had a fantastic time, and you really make this meaningful. A good friend of mine says, MCOM is amateur radio with a purpose. And I think there is something very true to that. And it rings true. And I hope they take some inspiration from this practice, get your friends to practice with you, and have a fantastic time with that. And with that, I wish you all 7 threes, and thank you so much for being here tonight.
You know, I'll move you back 2 years. Oh, Finn, you got your hand up. Okay, we gotta let you in there. Go ahead, Finn.
There, yeah, now it's open. I just have 3 small questions or comments. First, congratulations to Oliver as floor manager. I'm impressed. And then congratulations about the whole shakeout. And the last one is, please mention UTC time in the invitation on WinLink group for these RATPAC meetings. It was, I had to Google find out what is UTC time. And we don't know the ordinary United States times in Europe. That's all. Congratulations.
Okay, I'm the one that sends out those reports, those things, and I'll make a point to change it to get some UTC in there. And we got another one with a hand up there. N3 XUS, Gene.
Yeah, can everybody hear me?
Hear you fine.
Okay, this is N3XUS, Gene, Golf Echo, November Echo, from Killeen, Texas, November 3 X-ray Uniform Sierra. This is my first time on this Zoom meeting with y'all, and I am very impressed. Great presentation, a lot of in-depth knowledge from the after action review. We try to do those similar things here in Texas. I'm a volunteer commo operator with the Texas Department of Emergency Management, and I am very impressed with everybody's input and details that y'all provided tonight. There's a great knowledge base here, and I thank you for allowing me being part of this. 73s, this is November 3 X-ray Uniform Sierra out.
Okay, Gene, well, thank you very much. I'm sure, you know, I might make some comments at this point. Oliver, let's think back 2.5 years ago. WinLink, we did a RATPAC presentation on WinLink. Steve Waterman helped set that up. We had over 500 people on that RATPAC. It maxed out our license. It's now It's nationwide, it's worldwide, it's on the roll. People know what it is. They're asking questions. What am I been missing? And they're getting in there and doing things. Idaho is very involved now. And it used to be we did drills using whatever mode and all that stuff. We know how to work all these other modes. Now we're focusing on something that's uniformed and the agencies can relate to it. And that is an important thing. For years, we did not have that. We're sitting there with ham radio doing stuff with amateur radio and some poor agency guy trying to find out what we're talking about. We finally got on the single platform. And I have to hand to people like you, Oliver. If you recall back in the days of yesteryear, you were given lots of presentations on how to do it. We got a lot of requests for those presentations to repeat itself type of a thing. It's now lots of YouTubes on it, lots of organizations doing it. It's come a long ways, and I think it's on a roll. We got to keep going on this thing. It's all good news to me.
Dan, and thank you so much. I think it was your vision, the RATPAC vision, and many groups that we talked to in the early days. It certainly in the very beginning was an uphill battle, but is your enthusiasm, it's your platform, and all of you spreading the information and really seeing that we have a platform here that can do good in this world. And I think all of us in this room here today want to do good in this world. And so I'm really happy to see this. WinLink is a tool. It's only as good as the people sitting in front of it, but it's a very powerful tool. And it really enables us to speak, as you point out, across groups and also across organizations and agencies. And I think that's the true power. I've recently completed some training with Cal OES through CSTI. And every time I take one of those classes, it starts out, oh, he's a amateur radio operator, right? Roll eyes. And then we start talking about WinLink. Next thing you know, they're, okay, why don't you give us a 10-15 minute presentation on this? Because a lot of them are radio operators and think, wow, I never thought that this was actually, these are the ICS forms we use. And doing this when the other stuff doesn't work, which does happen, really puts people at ease. It gives them that peace of mind to focus on what they need to get done. And I think all of you are making this possible. So again, a big thank you to all of you. This is a community effort. We're doing this together, and I really appreciate being part of this community. So thank you so much.
Well, Oliver, we appreciate you and all you've done. You've done a lot for us. As a community, we need some guidance, and you've been right there along with some others to give us that guidance. We appreciate you very much so. Are there any more comments before Oliver jumps out? I think he's getting hungry. Okay, Barry, how are we doing on the comments?
We're good.
Okay, with that in mind, well, for those that don't know or new here, we do on every Thursday, we have a RATPAC that's aimed at disaster services. And it's very focused to that. We've done very well with that. And we have RATPAC has an Aries or ecom group. It's well over 1,000 people made up of people involved with disasters nationwide, and they share their experience. They share their comments, concerns, and so forth. It's a going thing, and we're going to keep it going. With that, I'm going to say 73s, everyone, and thank you very much for attending this, and have a good one.
Anybody want to come back and talk about bootstrapping SCS backdoor modems?
I'll close.
I don't understand that.
I'll say 73s. We've got net. Sorry. Thank you so much, everybody. We'll catch you later.
Oliver, thanks so much. 7-3, my friend. It's good to see you.
Hi, Lisa. Saw you back there before. I was going to holler. Okay, I'm going to close it out and come back. And as soon as I close it out, you come back in. You won't need me there to keep it open. Everybody will just go away when I go away, but then just check right back in here again and be a part of the discussion. Thank you very much for being here, and enjoy the Zoom session afterwards. 73s, everyone.